Hello, everyone. I'm Haley from Trapology Boston, an escape room and immersive entertainment company in downtown Boston. Today, I am joined by Ian from Broken Ghost Immersives. Hello, Ian. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. How are you doing, Haley?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. I'm over in Jersey right now. So just to get started, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Maybe some kind of fun fact Google wouldn't tell us about you?
I'm a theater nerd, Shakespeare nerd from way back, and now I make weird plays that are open to users to make their own stories. So they're open-ended plays here in Brooklyn, New York.
Mm-hmm. So can you give me kind of like the broad what Broken Ghost Immersives is?
We produce interactive events that are inspired by games. So they feature huge user agency and creative input where people can sort of direct the narrative towards what interests them. There are components like puzzles and games, and it's performative. So there are actors and a lot of storytelling.
So for those that maybe aren't as familiar with, escape rooms, theater, games, that kind of thing, how would you explain? Like if your grandparents wanted to know what you were doing, how would you tell them?
I would say, Grandma, you're going to love this play. You get to decide what happens in it. You get to vote where the story goes.
Do you ever come across people who don't fully understand what it is you're doing? Do you have to give a full pitch when you explain it?
Yeah, but the best way, maybe the hardest thing to do and the most important thing is to onboard people. So you take them into the shallow end of the pool and give them really simple choices, A or B, and then it grows more and more complicated, and before they know it, they're procedurally generating an exciting narrative, and they are the star of that narrative. So that's the general strategy. It's always about explaining and communicating dynamically.
Mm-hmm. So when you were first getting started, did you know exactly what you wanted to do with your company?
No, I didn't even know that I wanted to make a company. I knew that I had lived in this brownstone in Brooklyn. I'm lucky to have all this space, and I wanted to hold a spooky haunted house around Halloween. Except I didn't want it to be about jump scares and people in masks. I wanted it to be scary. You'd be in a haunted house where you'd have to deal with genuinely scary things, like talking about death and mortality. And so I made this sort of interactive funeral where you come to a funeral. It's called The Wake, and you are with the family of this person's past that's fictional and their friends, and you learn about them. And that was my idea of what a spooky haunted house should be like. And it was just sort of like it caught fire, and we wanted to hold more and more events. And they all sort of centered around user agency and the creative freedom to let the audience explore what interests them.
So when you approach people with the idea of an interactive memorial service, obviously that is a very unique idea. What was the general reaction you got from that?
It was contemplative, I would say, because the event was just like a memorial service. I mean, you came in, there was a guest book, somebody shook your hand, people were in suits. We all understand what that social event is, and yet there wasn't a dead person. So maybe it liberated people. It gave them a perspective to think about those themes in an abstract way, free of grief. And then it also sort of devolved into a David Lynchian surreal version where our guests entered the other side of mortality, and it got very theatrical there. But no, the reception was curiosity. It was a space where people could interact with their own curiosities, ignore what bored them, and pursue what interested them.
Mm-hmm. So that was obviously a very successful, very creative idea. How did you then use that to transition into building Broken Ghost Immersive to have even more projects to play with?
Well, all of the process was iterative. So it sort of started with people saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we tried such and such? Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we improved that somehow? And so through this iterative process, we're permutating and changing. And it's always sort of contingent on what audiences bring, what the participants bring, since it's their decisions that really call the shots. And in that way, giving it away to people has really been the guiding light, because their feedback, their experiences, that's ultimately the golden treasure we're pursuing, is how to sate their curiosity.
Mm-hmm. So with those projects, you get a lot of feedback from the audience. Obviously, it takes time to create everything. How much does each project change over time? Do you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, it's good, we don't have to touch it anymore?
Yeah, curiosity is a funny thing, right? Like when it's hot, you can just test things out all day. It's like an experiment. And some of our experiments have gone on for years. We had our sci-fi immersive that was a choose your own adventure for groups of 8 to 16. It was called The Bunker. And the conceit is you're trapped in a bunker during a post-apocalyptic event, and you explore this wasteland. And we iterated on that for almost 2 years of just pursuing our curiosities and seeing what people were drawn to. And invariably, the input that creative users brought was always way better than what we were offering up. And so it's just a constant evolution. And that's really what makes it continue, I think, is that it's greater than the sum of its parts, and everyone is collaborating collectively. It's not some sort of a static piece that a playwright writes and then everybody has to sit and watch it. This is dynamic, it's growing, it's changing, and the audience is the central engine for that.
Mm-hmm. So have you been working with the same people throughout all of these? Are there designated, like game designers versus the more theatrical parts? How does that process work with who you're working with?
We're like a snowball. I mean, the event is so inclusive that it has a way of just sort of wrapping people up into it, and people keep coming back. And then before you know it, we've had people that had artistic skills that have come, and now we're contributing in that way. People that were game designers, as you mentioned, because games and the mechanisms of the games, the structures of games are very important, and those make the best play testers, are people that want to break your game. And as well as writers, people that are interested in language, since language is our principal material with which we work. And so to answer your question, yeah, it's like a snowball. We've been adding people; it gets bigger and bigger. We've been lucky enough to hook up with a lot of the current and former students from NYU's ITP program, that's Interactive Communication Technology, because my background is not
Hold on,
theater and storytelling, but by reaching out to those, by including those. Oh, did you lose me? Did I freeze up?
Yeah, would you mind just repeating just like the past 5 seconds of what you said?
Absolutely. I think the last thing I said was that we've been lucky enough to partner with some of the current and former students from NYU's ITP program, which is the Interactive Communications Laboratory, where they make these incredible technological tools for escape rooms, interactive art performances, and we've been able to use them for our game purposes. So that technology has been an interesting tool that is. My background is in Shakespeare and theater, and not in tech.
Got it. So would you say that your favorite part to work with is the theater part, like more of the theatrical components, writing the scripts, that kind of thing?
If I were being honest, my favorite part is talking to people and meeting new people and just telling stories together. I think that probably comes from a background in tabletop gaming, like in Dungeons and Dragons, where you sit at a table with somebody, we're all a part of the same team, and something about that is very intoxicating. Where you meet somebody for the first time in this event. If you're a player, you're going to play together. If you're a game master like me, you're going to run the event. That's really what draws me the most. And most of our work isn't done behind a computer screen typing like a playwright would be. It's improvisational, it's performative, it's happening in the moment, and we're trying to sort of to have that dynamic proximity that can only really happen when you're in the room with somebody, talking to them, and that's the alluring, magical part that I.
Mm-hmm. So are you involved with running all of the games, or do you just try to get in when you can? Are you like there with the audience every time?
I have never, I've never been able to produce an event where I wasn't pulling all the strings, the grand poobah behind the scenes, like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. Part of that's because I have trouble delegating, and another part is that you know, I'm an auteur. I'm there from the beginning of the process, and I just want to make everything jive with my vision. So no, I do it all, top to bottom, and I love it. I love the details, the funnest part.
Mm-hmm. So you said that you work with people who are more into game design, whereas your background is more in theater. Was there much of a learning curve for you to get into the technology and the actual design?
I think we all have a really innate understanding of what a good game is like. Anybody that enjoys playing games probably could tell you what they like or don't like about a game. And in that sense, it's very intuitive. And I've been fortunate enough to learn a lot about the, you know, the theory and the mechanisms that are useful. And ultimately, I think it all kind of ties together, right? What makes us lean forward during the play and say, ooh, what's going to happen next? That's the same quality in a game where people lean forward and say, ooh, what's going to happen next? What do we want to do? And I think maybe we're circling the idea of managing players' or audiences' expectations, directing their focus one way and then having a reversal where it goes somewhere else. These are really basic tools that when they're accomplished, you know, when you have a good reversal or a good change in direction, that's just fundamentally satisfying. And that carries across plays, games, art. I think these are just, they make our brain crackle with fun thought.
Mm-hmm. Have there been any, I don't know, things that you've learned through these games or creating the company that you didn't necessarily expect, either in yourself or what you've seen from others?
You mean like what are the games that inspire us to make interesting things?
Let's do that as well, yes.
I think let's put it this way, the most exciting games are usually the ones that give you the most creative input. I think that's something I would stand behind. So a tabletop game like D&D invites a player to think up a character, make a backstory for this person, sort of immerse themselves in as deep a world as they can dream up. And so that invites a user who's you know, looking to be immersed with a capital I, compared to games that are more about mechanical functions like chess or checkers or something, where it's not inviting you to take that imaginative leap. So the games that really inspire me are usually the ones that have that imaginative magic to them. Certainly tabletop games. There are a lot of board games that invite people to be creative in their use. Even games like Settlers of Catan, Werewolf, Mafia, these are social games, and they encourage us to talk to people, to relate to them, and to solve puzzles of a social nature. And you can see that in a lot of our works. A lot of the game mechanics are things that force you to relate to somebody, communicate with someone meaningfully that maybe you've never met before tonight. But in this event, you're going to have to learn to work together for your mutual benefit. That's very, very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, you know, gaming and interactive projects really have, you know, been a thing for a lot of your life. Do you feel like creating Broken Ghost Immersives was a natural progression for you? Do you think that was just like, yeah, that was going to happen at some point?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, if anybody out there has curiosity or an urge to create something and share it with people, my enthusiastic advice would be, don't worry, just try it. Just do it. Just get people in a room and see what happens. Because if you enjoy if you enjoy pursuing that curiosity, there's no way to mess it up. Even if you fell on your face, you would still have fun and learn something. So in that sense, yeah, it was a totally natural result of my curiosities, and I think that's part of the reason why people come back to play the events multiple times, is that they can pursue their curiosities, and there's no finite end state in any of our pieces. They're all open-ended. They have unlimited endings pursued that are only limited by the creative input of the people who play them. They get to play on it like a jungle gym, up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have there ever been any decisions that have been made by an audience or a player that has completely like thrown you off or was really unexpected for you?
Yeah, there's some that are really exciting, some that are really just people kind of giving up, which happens. You have to design a possibility space to accommodate anything people bring, and people are so unpredictable. In the bunker, that was our sci-fi choose your own adventure, there were sort of the classic idea of the random encounter where you're going to explore the wasteland and you might meet some kind of a monster. And generally speaking, in adventures, the two classic choices might be to run away or to fight it, right, for some reward. There's a risk-reward ratio there. And every now and then you'd get users that were so creative, it would be like, I'm not going to run, I'm not going to fight, I'm going to seduce the monster. Or I'm going to sing a song and soothe it. These are, and that's the kind of yes-anding, like an improv, that is just greater than the sum of its parts. The story will turn on that, and you can make a game that's fun, and you can call that back over and over again. But then on the other hand, you have people that maybe don't want to give an easy answer. I had one guy once that said, I just lay down and die and let it kill me. And just like in improv, you can't say no. I mean, I can never say to a player, as a game master, I can never say to a player because they're in charge. So then you have to figure out a way to accommodate their input, even when you wish they hadn't said what they said. It's not about that, it's about them.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a lot of thinking on your feet for the people who work for you and set this thing up.
Communication is key. Yeah, it's all about working in tandem. Because there are several game masters that work together as an integrated whole, and we all have to know what's happening with one another in the respective modules. Because one of the big parts of all these shows is splitting people up between different game masters and then ping-ponging around with different pieces of the information scattered like a mosaic, because we're forcing people to talk. Yeah. But so for the game masters, yeah, you need to know what's happening in these other modules. You need to know, what the variables are that could change based on decisions. And you have to be flexible for the great unknown, for the great idea somebody might have that's going to pivot the whole story, like seducing the monster or soothing the monster.
Mm-hmm. Do you play your own games ever to get an idea of what the audience is going through?
Oh, yeah. I kind of think I'm playing even when I'm game mastering because it feels like a game, right? So doesn't feel like work. But yeah, absolutely. They're fun. I mean, who doesn't like to tell stories? It reminds me a little bit of being a kid when you're camping in the tent with a flashlight up way too late, telling ghost stories or telling crazy tales. It feels a lot like that.
Mm-hmm. So how long does it take from the idea of one of these games to the actual, we're putting it out in the real world, we're bringing in the audience, we're playing?
Well, it's kind of an organic process, to be honest. I mean, it's iterative and it's about play testing. So a lot of minds have to test the durability of an idea and sort of change it, transmute it before you can put it in front of an audience. You have to have a really specific understanding of the scope of how flexible it is, where it can go, and what the parameters are. So the shortest one we've ever done was a matter of weeks. And the bunker was the longest one we ever did. And that was in residence for almost 2 years, and it never stopped changing. So, but you need at least a couple months for most ideas, even the simple ones, I think. If you're going to give people meaningful agency, you'd need a couple months to test it out.
Mm-hmm. Have there been any ideas that you were excited about at the beginning, but as you started to work on it, maybe you had to like change it a lot, or it just wasn't working?
All the time. I am great at making bad ideas. Yeah, there's been so many dumb ideas. The worst is when you go sit down to play test something that you've spent, hours and hours you poured into it, and on turn one you think, oh, this isn't going to work. This is all I already know the result of this experiment. I made one game that was it was supposed to be like a mega game. By that I mean a game for lots of people, inspired by Stardew Valley, like a farming game, or like Harvest Moon, if you remember that old 64 game. The idea was that you're all farmers, and you got to pick what crops you grow, and kind of like the farming game, which is a board game. But it was going to have a market system. There was going to be like a cash commodity trade thing. And as I was explaining the conceit of the game to the playtesters, somebody really loudly said, farming. And it was like, oh man, yep, this idea is not good.
So when something like that happens, how do you, like convince yourself, okay, that's fine, the next one is going to be great? How do you work from that?
Well, I don't know. Letting go of bad ideas is easy. They're bad ideas. Give them away. It's easier. I used to write plays. I used to be more of a playwright, and in a way that was harder because you'd sit at a computer, obsessing over every word and every idea, and then you put it in front of an audience. And from my perspective, it was deeply discouraging if the audience didn't walk away with exactly what you wanted to. And it was much harder to let go of your old ideas in that setting because you're making something that's static. It lives on a page. The words are the words. It is finite. But this paradigm is social. It's fun. It's improvisatory. And that paradigm's easy to let go of bad ideas. They're bad ideas. They're gone. Keep going.
Are there any ideas you have floating around right now that you're hoping to explore in the future?
Oh my God, yes. When March rolled around, we were playtesting 3 different cool immersives. Like we had 3 different irons in the fire. And they were all sort of predicated on the idea of getting people into one room and playtesting. Because I'm a real believer in interpersonal communication, which is difficult over Zoom. You kind of lose that dynamic proximity. But we had one that was, and these might all reappear once we're able to get in the room again. There was one called Soviet Simulator, a communist party, which recreates the Soviet economy. And the idea is that you have to compete and amalgamate consumer goods to compete with the decadent West. And it's a social game all about resource management with a procedurally generated narrative. We were working on that. We were working on a space-themed one. We were working on a tabletop game that people can play at home. We've been able to keep playtesting that because that can kind of work over the internet. But I'm really excited to arrive at a time when we can hold events again and keep playing games.
Mm-hmm. Is your brain just like always firing, looking for ideas? Do you just always have that drive to find a new game?
Well, I'm always playing games. Yeah, that's true. And I think about creative output kind of like capturing. It's more like putting out crab pots and seeing what wanders in. And so in that sense, I just try to write everything down, and I end up with these giant wall calendars where I'm writing on the blank back, of just nonsensical prison cell ramblings of a madman that are, 90% of it is useless. But since I do it all the time, that one time when you write something down that you can revisit later and use, that's pretty good. That's pretty useful. So I feel like you just always capture your thoughts and don't let them pass, because it's gold.
So if there were no barriers in place from, I don't know, space, money, any kind of restriction, is there a dream game you would just love to put on?
Oh, I would host mega games. Have you ever heard of a mega game?
Not until now.
I know it's quite a title, isn't it? A mega game. There's a famous mega game called Watch the Skies. And this is a game that can be played by hundreds of people. There is basically no limit to how big it could be if you were ambitious enough. And it's really big in the UK and in Europe. And they'll get like, a giant community center, and 200 people come into it. And the conceit is that aliens have arrived on Earth, and you're like the model UN. So you're working for India, I'm working for Brazil. There's a whole team of aliens. In some games, there's like a pope. Somebody plays the Vatican. And you've all got goals. And how do you advance those goals? You have to talk to each other and share information. But if I had no barriers, I would hold events like that were for huge scales of people, huge teams of moderators, and a sort of mega quality. That game, by the way, takes 6 to 8 hours to play. It's a whole day. It's a whole thing.
I mean, it sounds super fun. I want you to create a mega game based on just what I've heard so far. Your ideas are so insane. I can only imagine what you would come up with for that.
It's fun. It's fun to be with people. It's fun to talk. And I think more than ever now, I miss it. It's never been more precious to be with people, having a good time. It seems very special.
Absolutely. It's a great way for people to come together and really use their creativity when they wouldn't necessarily be doing so in their lives normally.
Yeah, that's true. We held a lot of our best-selling nights, believe it or not, were like Wednesday night shows, Tuesday night shows, because people, if given the choice between just kind of frittering away a Tuesday night with something passive, a lot of people would prefer to do something active that stimulates their creative impulses.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I mean, everyone wants to do that as much as they can. So we are running a little short on time now. So I just wanted to open this up. If there's anything you would like to share about your company looking forward, any fun stories, just any last things you would like to share.
Well, there is one thing that I think is really important, and I can't underline this enough. There's going to be a shift in the ecosystem of immersive entertainment, interactive games, escape rooms. All of these industries are going to be coming out of the quarantine thirsty for business. And I would strongly ask and pray for all of the people to see this. When the opportunity avails itself, go out there and buy a ticket to something you've always wanted to go, you've always meant to go. This is the time to support it, because if we don't all come together and support it in the next, the next future, part of the future, it could go away or could significantly change in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is great advice. I know I'm certainly going to be following that as soon as I can.
Me too.
Thank you so much for talking with me today. I hope you had a good time. I know I did, and I learned a lot from you, so thank you for that.
It was a pleasure. Anytime.
Perfect. Well, I can't wait to see what you do moving forward. Thank you again, and thank you everyone for listening.